beautiful machine you see behind me here is the original John Willment Group Ford Escort Twin-Cam. Now I say original because there were actually two of these cars, the second of which became an RS 1600.
Crabtree through into Maxim Rise on the 15 lap, out of 15, lights ablaze in the John Willment Group RS 1600 Ford Escort.
But this right here is where it all began. Now the John Willment Group was actually a pretty big operation, and as well as owning multiple Ford dealerships around Britain, it also had a construction company and actually built the Cooper Cars factory in 1957. Now even if you've never heard of the John Willment Group, you'd likely know some of the cars that they raced. There were Lotus and Brabham Formula 1 cars, plus Formula 2 and Formula 3. Jack Sears won the 1963 British Saloon Car Championship driving a 427 Galaxy run by Willments. That was actually one of 4 Group 2 lightweight Galaxies built by Holman Moody and sent to Europe. There was a Cobra Roadster, at least one Cobra Roadster, the one-off Willment Cobra Coupe, chassis CSX 2131, Lotus 30, Lotus Cortina, it sort of went on and on. And in 1967, John Willment himself teamed up with John Wyer to form JW Automotive. Quite fortunately, the two had the same initials. JWA initially ran Mirage M1s in the World Sports Car Championship, sponsored by Gulf, and in 1968 switched to Ford GT40s and won Le Mans in 1968 and 69, and then switched to running Porsche 917s in 1970. So this little car really has quite an incredible pedigree. Usually when the John Willment Group went motor racing, it was on a pretty grand scale, but that wasn't the case at all with this car. The program was spearheaded by a racer by the name of Mike Crabtree, and Mike just happened to be the general manager of John Willment Ford in Mitcham, Surrey. Now Mike and a small number of employees at the dealership basically gave up their spare time, the evenings and Saturdays, to both build and race this car. Now this Escort started life as a very early twin-cam street car. It was one of the very first twin-cams built. In fact, it was one of the very first Ford Escorts built. It was driven straight from the factory to the dealership, where it was immediately converted into a race car. It was never actually road registered in Great Britain. Ken Britton at Racing Services built a dry sump race motor for it, and Borum Competition Ford supplied a bunch of the racing components, including the turreted roof, the bubble flares, rear suspension kit, gearbox parts, and various other bits and pieces that went into it. This Escort made its competition debut in round 9 of the 1968 British Saloon Car Championship at Alton Park. And back in 1968, the British Saloon Car Championship was split into 4 classes, all based on engine sizes, classes A, B, C and D. Class A was for cars up to 1000 cc's, Class B for cars up to 1300 cc's, Class C up to 2000 cc's, and Class D for over 2000 cc's. And of those 4 classes, Escorts were actually represented in 3 of them. Team Broadspeed ran a pair of 1300cc twin-cam Escorts in Class B. This car ran in Class C, and a pair of Alan Mann Ford Escorts ran in Class D. The Alan Mann cars were fitted with Cosworth FVA Formula 2 engines with 16 valves, so these weren't actually street engines or production engines, so they had to move up a class. The celebrated motoring journalist John Blunsdon did a track test magazine feature on this car for Motor Racing and Sports Car magazine, and it also appeared on the front cover of Autosport magazine in early 1970. After its 1968 debut, Mike Crabtree raced the Escort right throughout the 1969 British Saloon Car Championship, and he won his class. He also finished 4th outright, and he finished on the podium outright on 3 occasions that season. So this was a really fast little car. In late late 1969, the Escort was sold to a Kiwi racer by the name of Jim Carney. But Carney wasn't actually buying the car for himself to race. He was buying it for a virtual unknown young driver called Jim Richards. Now, Jim Richards was a guy with a world of talent but no money. He was a motor mechanic. But Carney could spot the talent. He could see that this guy was going somewhere and he really wanted to help his career. So he bought this car for Richards to race in the New Zealand Saloon Car Championship. The Escort made its New Zealand competition debut at Bay Park in late December 1969, by which stage the championship was already several races old. At the time, there were 4 different classes, all based on engine size, and this car competed in the 4.2 litre championship, and Richards was immediately on the pace. He won on debut, but he spent the rest of the championship playing catch-up because he had missed the start of the season, even though he was the pace setter. In several races that season, he actually competed against the V8s and beat some of the V8s, even though they were in a bigger class. And by the end of the season, even though he finished 3rd in his class championship, everybody knew who Jim Richards was. The following season, Richards won his class championship quite comfortably, and then in '71 the two Jims jumped on an aeroplane and went to England so that Jim Richards could test drive the latest Team Broadspeed Escort RS 1600 with a BDA engine. This car was being driven in the '71 British Saloon Car Championship by John Fitzpatrick. Jim Richards test drove the car, he was happy with it, and Carney slapped down a deposit. They just had to basically wait for the Escort to finish its British Saloon Car Championship duties, and then it would be shipped to New Zealand. However, in the final round of the championship at Brands Hatch, Fitzpatrick and Camaro driver Frank Gardner had a huge coming together. Both cars suffered a lot of damage, and although Broadspeed offered to fix the Escort, the delay in doing so meant that again Richards would miss the start of the championship, and so regretfully Carney pulled out of the deal. And that meant that Richards ran a 3rd season in this Escort here. He almost won the championship again. In fact, it went right down to the last race of the last round of the championship. Richards and Don Halliday, driving another Ford Escort, battled all the way to the finish line. Don Halliday just pipped Richards at the post. And then at the end of the '72 season, at the end of that season, Jim Richards and Jim Carney basically just went their separate ways. Jim Richards decided to branch out on his own, and with support from Sid Chrome Tools, financial support from Sid Chrome Tools, and with his good friend Murray Bunn, Richards and Murray built a 1969 Boss 302 Mustang to compete for outright honours. Richards went on to win the 1974 New Zealand Saloon Car Championship outright in the Sid Chrome Mustang, and then in 1975 took the car to Australia, started building himself a career over there. Eventually, Richards went on to win 4 Australian Touring Car Championships and the Bathurst 1000 7 times. And that career and all those successes can be tracked right back to this car here. Now, tracking back to 1972, and the Escort was sold by Jim Carney to another racer by the name of Lynn Nielsen. Nielsen raced it for a couple of seasons and then sold it, and it passed through a few different owners until in 1990 it was purchased by my good friend Raiden Smith, and Raiden still owns the car to this day. And when Raiden bought the Escort, it was painted black and it was powered by a 13B Mazda Rotary. He whipped that out obviously and put a Escort BDA into it and painted it back into the colours as it ran in Britain and its early years in New Zealand. And these days it's powered by an alloy block 1840cc Lotus Twin-Cam, and Raiden is still historic racing it. Now let me show you around this car, guys, because this is truly an amazing piece of Ford motor racing history. I feel quite privileged just to stand this close to it, to be honest. This is, without a doubt, one of the most important competition Ford Escorts on the entire planet. Obviously repainted it back in the off-white and red as raced by John Willment Group in 1968 and 69, and then its first 3 seasons here in New Zealand. And I'll just show you here on the door, you can see various drivers and owners right through to Raiden Smith, who's owned the car since 1990. So he's had it for 34 years and counting. So he's owned it for longer than everyone else put together. It is an incredibly original car. These flares are believed to be the originals as supplied by Borum to John Willment Group in 1968 when the car was being built. Still has the reinforced turreted roof. If you look at the early photos, any early photos or footage of these cars, including the Alan Mann cars and this car, you'll see that they didn't have a roll cage. The bodies were incredibly rigid, but safety wasn't really a thing. Obviously this car has a roll cage now, but it still has the reinforced roof, and rigidity was a big deal with these cars. When it was sold by Jim Carney to Lynn Nielsen, Nielsen fitted it with a fiberglass hood, or bonnet, and deck lid, boot lid. And these are the original items as fitted by Nielsen in around 1972, 73 or so. So those are amazing survivors too. And also these mini light wheels. Lynn Nielsen fitted these very mini light wheels on the car when he owned it in the early 1970s. So it's really an amazing time warp. It's quite unbelievable just how amazing and original this car is. Now I just wanted to show you inside here, guys, because this thing just has loads of character. All Lotus equipped, as you would expect. Now this passenger seat over here is pretty cool. This is actually from Richard Kelsey's Massport built Mark II Escort RS 1800, which Radin owned back in the 1990s, and in fact the BDA from that motor ended up in this car. Jim Richards' signature on the dashboard, which is a nice touch. And yeah, it's not restored, it's not flash, it's just perfect. There's just loads of patina, loads of character, just a neat place to spend time. I just love it. Now this is the Escort's original registration number from when it first arrived in New Zealand in late 1969. This is a quirk of New Zealand regulations back then, that all cars, even race cars like this, that were never intended for road use, had to be road registered. Now if I can just climb under here, I just wanted to show you the rear end. In period, all these factory works racing Escorts had a coil spring rear suspension setup with a single leaf spring. Basically the leaf spring was doing nothing, it was just there to appease officials, and the coil springs were doing all the work. They had a 4-link setup, and the rear chassis rails, where they rise up over the rear axle, they were raised, they were lifted up, and they were narrowed and moved slightly inward, just to allow for the wider wheels and tyres, and also the lower ride height that these cars had. As you can see, the leaf springs are no longer on this car, but really, like I say, the coil springs and the 4-link setup are doing all the work. Now let me show you the heart of the beast, guys, because, oh man, this little motor is just so cool. This is a Lotus Twin-Cam, obviously. It features an alloy block, 1840 cc's. It was built by Grady Homewood, who is the son of legendary race car and engine builder Bob Homewood, and it just looks so perfect in this engine bay. Just love this thing, it's just gorgeous in here. I just want to show you something down the front here. I'm not sure if you can really see it on the side. Let's have a look at the other side here. There we go. Down the bottom there, attached to the front subframe, you'll see a bracket, and the front anti-roll bar is attached to that. These were only fitted to the very early Escort twin cams, so it shows you that this is a really early car. And I also wanted to show you something else here. This rear window is actually different to a stock rear window on a Mark I Escort. A standard Mark I Escort rear window will not fit this space. And while we're here, I'll just show you in the back. Dry sump tank here. This car ran a dry sump in period. And where this alloy plate is, there would have once been a very large fuel tank. British Saloon Car Championship races were pretty long, so these cars needed to carry a fair bit of fuel. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't switch off just yet because Raiden's about to take me for a quick blast up the road in this amazing historic car. So we will catch you next time. See ya!